Out. Hi, everyone. This is April 18th. This is the code organization subproject of SIG architecture. This is the kickoff meeting. So welcome, everyone. And please be kind to each other. We'll get the ball rolling. I have some work going on in the house, so you might hear some roof banging on the roof and stuff like that. So if it happens, Andrew will take over and continue the meeting. So hopefully that will work for everyone. So does everyone have the link to the doc that we'll be using today? I will just paste one in the chat room. And Andrew has added some stuff on the agenda, I think. So maybe we can just start there and then we can go over the rest of the things in the document. Unless other people have things that they want to bring up, just add it to the open discussion and we can continue there. So I think most of us know each other, but there are a few new people I would like to say a few things about themselves or what they are interested in. I'll call on you folks. So Alok, do you want to start?
Hello, I think can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I'm Alok. I'm in Bangalore. I work in Practo. I've used Kubernetes for like a few years now, from 2017, but I've started involving in SIG architecture and SIG node. Started with some tasks given by IMS, worked on those things. So that's it. Hello.
Thanks, Alok. Valerie, would you like to go next?
I missed what we're doing, sorry.
Just introductions.
Hi, I'm Valerie. I work at Lyft. I mostly do downstream stuff, but I do a bit of miscellaneous upstream stuff as well with Kubernetes.
Okay. Ryan? Ryan?
Hey guys, I'm Ryan. I work at Cray. We do kind of a lot of both downstream and trying to do some more upstream stuff as well.
Okay. Damini?
Hello, everyone. I'm Damini. I work at Salesforce. So I'm here just to explore and get myself used to the ecosystem of Kubernetes. So yeah, hello, everyone.
Okay. Machi?
Hey, I'm Machi. I work for Red Hat on OpenShift. And at the same time, I'm SIG CLI chair and lead.
Okay. Thank you. So my nickname is Dims. I work for Huawei. So who else wants to go? Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I work at VMware and mostly work in the cloud provider SIG. Yeah, that's it. I live in Toronto. Hi.
Hi. Jordan?
I'm Jordan Liggett. I work on whatever I see that's a problem. I work for Google. Yeah.
Thank you. Tim?
Hey, I'm Tim. I made most of the mess, or at least a good chunk of it, so I'm here to at least help people clean up after me.
Okay, thank you. Quinton, we are doing introductions and you have a lovely view. Quinton, would you like to?
Yeah, hello, sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. Yeah, I'm just here to see if I can help with anything and see if I can identify problems that our company can donate people to solving.
Okay, thank you. David?
My name is David Eads, Des2K on GitHub. I am a SIG API machinery lead, work for Red Hat. I'm also responsible for a fair amount of the sausage. So I'm here to help out, and I have a lot of experience trying to vendor pieces of Cube over the years.
Thank you. Jace?
I'm Jace Singer-Dumars. I'm a co-chair of SIG Architecture, and I'm a sub-project lead for SIG PM and do other things around the project. And basically here just to kind of help and do whatever I can.
Thank you. Tim Allclair?
Hi, Tim Allclair. I work with SIGAuth and SIGNode in the product security committee. And I'm terrified of the state of our vendor dependencies. So that's why I'm here.
Clayton?
I'm Clayton Coleman. I work for Red Hat. Like Tim, I also am responsible for some of this mess, although I'm the person that probably is the most annoyed by the mess. So I am here to offer opinions and assistance.
Clayton, when can we start V2 of Kubernetes?
Tomorrow. We're going to tear it all down, right? Right, Tim?
Sign me up, baby.
Okay. Should we do it in Rust?
I'm partial to D.
Or Bash, right? Okay.
We already wrote it in Bash once.
Right. Okay. So let me quickly look at what has been added so far. So let's go to Andrew. Andrew, can you please give us an update on the cloud provider stuff and where it is and how can we drop like 20, 40 megabytes of code from the Hypercube image?
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, as many of you know, we have an effort to get all clusters onto out-of-tree cloud providers versus the in-tree right now. So there are three main issues that we need to tackle. The first one is actually getting rid of all the vendor dependencies to cloud SDKs that we have in KK. This is tricky because it's not just the main cloud provider integrations that import those SDKs. It's also all the in-tree volume plugins and the end-to-end testing framework and the credential provider and the kubelet. And so in order to remove these steps, we need to first migrate all of these clusters to be using the Cloud Controller Manager and the CSI and the out-of-tree credential provider, which we're working on this release. The second problem is binary sizes, which is related to the first, but we can sort of tackle parts of this in parallel. So this is just kind of like seeing which dependencies, which imports we can remove without kind of having to necessarily remove it from vendor. And the third problem is that the existing cloud provider implementations, they have to import the main tree, which is problematic because we didn't really set up KK to be imported externally in that way. And so a lot of the cloud controller managers are in dependency hell because they're importing, Kubernetes/CMD cloud controller manager, which imports, package controller and pretty much everything else that comes with it. And so we need to probably come up with a plan to make the cloud controller manager a little bit more friendly from external consumers. And so like we've had this discussion in SIG Cloud Provider a few times. And the main problem there is that the Cloud Controller Manager imports all of the the cloud-specific controllers, and we don't really know what a good home for those are because they're still imported in the Kube Controller Manager. So should those be in staging repos or should they be in core? That we need to have a discussion about. So those are the three big things with respect to cloud providers. And so I know SIG testing is also doing a lot of work in testing commons to also like rip out or like refactor the E2E testing framework so that we can also pull the providers out of that. So that's kind of like a high level overview of what we're working on there.
So can I be the first to say thank you for continuing to tilt at this windmill? I thought I saw a KEP or something last week that was going to move the generic cloud providers out into a separate staging repo. Is that contentious?
No, we have buy-in from most people, I think, with respect to that. And so that is, that is just to kind of, like, we're finding it hard to push users to use the Cloud Controller Manager and especially like also not just users, but developers too. And the main the main problematic thing has been that developers don't want to maintain 2 Git trees of the in-tree cloud provider and the out-of-tree. And so by pushing the legacy in-tree implementations to staging repo, we're kind of we're forcing developers to, like, we're saying like you have no other choice now, you have to build your out-of-tree. You can vendor in whatever you had in-tree and have the exact same implementation. And so that should be done in 115. We should have most of the cloud providers move to that staging repo in the next few weeks.
Right. On a spectrum, Andrew, on one side we have the OpenStack one where the external cloud provider is working fine and a lot of the adoption has already happened. So what is the spectrum and who are the lagging behind or the most trickiest to remove? Does the spectrum look like at this point?
Yeah, so I would say the earliest cloud providers are the hardest because they have, so like Google, for example, has the SSH tunnel, which adds a lot more complexity to the migration. But this just makes sense, right? Because the earlier adopters had just more features to add in the beginning. So I think I want to say the laggers are Google and AWS and Azure, just because they have the large user base and it's harder to gain adoption, especially in those larger production environments.
Okay. So, not to put Tim and Jordan on the spot, since Walter is not here, is there an effort that is happening which is funded where things are trying to move the SIG GCP stuff?
I don't know the status of that. Do you, Jordan?
I know that things have been moving over to the Google Cloud Platform Cloud Provider repo. So things have been moving out. As far as flipping the switch to run the external cloud provider process, I don't know.
Okay.
I would defer to Walter on that.
Okay. Yeah, and so this is the motivation behind the staging repo as well. If we can get buy-in from enough people and set a firm date on this is when we're deleting this repo, then I think that would be a great forcing function for all the different vendors and providers to move forward on this effort.
Right. Then the other one that came up just last week was the credential provider. We still don't have an answer for that yet, right? Jordan, you and I and Andrew, I think the three of us touched that a little bit, but I don't think we have like a plan for it yet.
Yeah, I looked at it briefly. It looks like some of the credential provider implementations don't actually pull in like a lot of big SDK dependencies. Some of them are really lightweight and file-based or like speak directly to metadata endpoints. Some of them pull in like full SDKs. So yeah, like you said, we just noticed that last week. So I guess identifying which ones pull in full SDKs and seeing what the alternatives are. I know the AWS one just got refactored, which is nice, but it's also making use of SDK functionality. It was
Jordan,
before.
Could I add one note too here? Like a good thing for us to think about as well is like when we're talking about these organizationally, there are the subtle cost that comes with a lot of co-located code is shared dependencies.
Yes.
And as Jordan was reminding me last night, gRPC, for instance, tried to
2 items down on the agenda.
Okay.
If you want to wait, and we can all frown at that when we get to it.
Pre-frowning.
Yeah.
So Jordan, would SIG-Archit be the right place for a KEP, and would we be able to find an owner for it, for the credential provider?
So Mike Crute from Amazon, he's working on a KEP already.
Okay.
But we'll definitely present it to SIG-Archit and any other interested SIGs.
Does SIG-Auth own credential providers, or does SIG-Node? I thought the interaction was all inside the container runtime.
Yeah, I can't
look. I don't remember that being on our list of things we paid attention to. So it doesn't really matter, but yeah, we should figure out who owns it.
Okay.
We can present it to both. Yeah.
As long as there is an owner, then we can involve the concerned SIGs, right? So that's the first thing that we need. So if Mike M. Crute is taking the lead there, then that sounds awesome. Anything else?
Can you drop a link to the KEP or doc in progress for that if you have it handy?
Sure. I think it's a private Google Doc right now, but I'll ask him to open it up.
Sounds good.
Okay. So that sounds good. So Jordan, do you want to talk about the C advisor stuff that happened a couple of weeks?
Yeah, so I thought something that might be helpful to do is to kind of highlight things that have happened that worked well that we would like to see more of if people are looking for types of things to work on, and then also highlight new problems or recent things that we see as problematic. So first, good news, DIMS had an update in SIG-Advisor. So previously we would import SIG-Advisor, and SIG-Advisor would set up stuff to gather information from every container runtime under the sun. So it would say, I'm going to pull in Rocket libraries and Mesos libraries and Docker libraries and Cryo and Containerd and Systemd and everything, just in case I need to gather information from that container runtime. And that meant when we pulled in SIG-Advisor, we pulled in all of those trees. And so we actually went upstream to SIG-Advisor and pulled that out into each of those runtimes, container runtime integrations into their own package. And so SIG-Advisor, like the SIG-Advisor binary, still imports them all by default. So everybody using SIG-Advisor, like the shipped binary, sees no change. But when we pull it in as a library, we can pick and choose which container runtimes we want to, which container runtime integrations we want to support. So it let us drop all of the Mesos and Rocket dependencies. So that dropped about 200,000 lines of code from our vendor tree, which was fantastic. So when we're thinking about ways to improve what we are pulling in and have to maintain and try to negotiate as far as like shared dependencies, be willing to go upstream to some of these. If there's a simple way to snip some of those upstream, a relatively small change can actually pay off in big ways. And it's tricky to do compatibly. So like in the SIG-Advisor case, we're able to do that. But yeah, there's a lot of hand-wringing that goes on anytime a dependency gets bumped. We're like, oh, this is bringing in like 25 new things and 100,000 lines of code. If only there was something we could do. Like, well, sometimes there is. Like asking the question, why are these here and are they required? And if we took a change upstream to make it opt-in, could we improve the situation? So that's a good question to ask.
The other thing that got nuked was the CMD CF SSL package, and that pruned quite a bit of dependencies as well. Then the other one that changed that went in last night was we dropped local and CentOS directories from under cluster. So that didn't change the binary size itself, but that has been pending for a long time. Deprecation deprecated more than a year ago, so we removed that. There was one more problem that came up in SIG-Node. I think Tim Allclair, there was a change in SIG-Advisor you had made, and there were some concerns about it in the call yesterday.
Yeah, so I did a similar thing to what we did with the runtimes to make the cloud provider information populating in SIG-Advisor opt-in. And I think this didn't actually end up dropping any lines of code because the cloud provider functionality is already pulled in for that, but this would be sort of a prerequisite to getting rid of those. The decision is that we need to follow even though we don't really think anyone is using those endpoints, but we don't have any way to be sure. So we're going to follow a deprecation timeline on that. And I'm going to actually try and rip out all of the SIG-Advisor endpoints that are exposed by the kubelet. I guess that would happen in 1.17.
And there is a KEP already for it, which will remove all of SIG-Advisor usage from our KK-Cube code base, right?
No, so this isn't, maybe. I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay.
This is not about removing SIG-Advisor as a dependency, but removing any like user-facing piece of SIG-Advisor so that SIG-Advisor just becomes an implementation detail. And that's sort of the prerequisite to removing SIG-Advisor.
Gotcha. Okay. And then maybe 1.18.20, something like that. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Clayton, did you want to say something?
No, I was just adding to what Tim was saying. Cloud Advisor, SIG-Advisor is a library.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I had a quick question. I'll do my normal thing, which is, do we have a like an analysis of where the problems are here? I mean, it's great that we're making progress on these various fronts, but I still don't have a big picture view of here's the size of the problem and these are the bits that we've, fixed and these are the bits we still have to fix. Do we have anything like that yet?
Yeah, so Quentin, the agenda doc, if you scroll down to the next page, there's 2 or 3 more pages with the things that we have already collected. We need to triage it, prune it, and convert it into milestones and project boards and things like that. But we are collecting information. So if you know of additional stuff, you can just add it to the doc at the bottom.
Some of the things that we have done recently is just sort of slicing and dicing our dependency tree a few different ways. So looking at all of the vendor packages that get built and saying, what are the biggest 20? So the top 20 that contribute to code size. Another is just looking at shared dependencies. That's one of the items later. What are dependencies that we get a lot of conflicts on, and what is causing those conflicts? So we're trying to slice and dice that a few different ways so we can understand and work on the most important, impactful things.
So that was actually what I was going to ask, Jordan. Do we have tools for this? Do we have something that'll draw a DAG of all of our dependencies so we can see the number of incoming links and the relative size in terms of LOC? I'm thinking pprof or something would make a really good visualization of this. So we could put a bounty on cutting off the biggest things that have the least number of inbound links, whether that's by rewriting those libraries ourselves or just breaking dependencies or whatever, right?
Yeah,
that's the goal.
We had it at the module level. So GoMod graph will dump a graph of dependencies. And then I think Tim Allclair had a package level one that he worked on.
I have a patch that I need to push actually that adds in lines of code, both per package and kind of cumulative.
Okay.
Do we have a comprehension of the relative risk of these dependencies? Philosophically, do we think big dependencies are riskier or less maintained dependencies are riskier, or which are the things that, if we were to put a bounty on this, suppose we literally put money on this, what are the things we would advise people to go after?
Well, from security, small stuff is clearly the biggest issue.
Small stuff is easier to review.
Well,
but
I think. Well, no, but my point is if you look at the NPM attack, it was some random library that nobody was maintaining anymore that someone else took over. That's
right.
the risk. A cloud provider may be giant, but it's not. It's a lot less likely that it's going to get compromised.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's not true.
From a security perspective, but from a transitive dependency perspective.
Yes, that one.
One cloud provider.
Are awful.
There's the thing that I linked to later. Upgrading one cloud provider library required pulling in 25 new small to big dependencies. So it's one thing that you sort of assume has been vetted and is okay, but then the ripples are huge.
And I don't know how to figure out whether these libraries are actively maintained or not.
No.
So from a consumer perspective, the transitive dependencies become a real problem. When you're depending on level A, someone else depends on level B, it seems to compile and run with level B, but you end up with weird, subtle bugs.
I would go even further, David. I mean, I would guess that the vast majority of vendor bumps are done without any review, audit, or even understanding of the changes beyond the first
order. Dirty laundry.
Yeah, but beyond the first order. And so effectively it is a pull and pray, and all we're relying on is static compilation. So and that our tests still pass.
Yeah.
And so we definitely maybe need to be a little bit more whatever the process is that owns it. I feel like putting a reasonable set of eyes and attention on this particular aspect is something no one has signed up to do, possibly except Jordan and Tim and a few others historically, as we've done various initiatives like the licensing and the Go module stuff.
If I had to pick a metric to rank these by, it would be number of outgoing dependencies.
I was going to add
if something is big, but has few transitive dependencies, like worst case, even if it's unmaintained, we can fork it and fix a security bug. If, you know, but the more ripples it has, the harder it makes everything to find a level that we can live with.
I think that's a good metric.
I was going to add, like, I don't know if any of the other big providers are doing things like this internally that they'd be willing to share as well. So Red Hat has a team that's doing open source dependency traversal and risk analysis for both identifying CVEs as well as many of these same features and metrics. Some of it's ML based, some of it's heuristic based. There was an attempt to, like, we care about it because it helps OpenShift and Kubernetes. And so it might be useful for, if there's others out there who also have like data approaches to this and are willing to share it, we'd certainly be happy. I'd be happy to make that team come and, you know, offer the reports, because they're basically just going to turn around and offer the same reports to us.
Like, no, I'll connect you with Matt at GitHub, because I believe GitHub is doing something similar.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't, for us, it's not like a private or a secure, like this isn't like an internal competitive advantage of things. So like, I know that's a sensitive topic for some folks, but we'd be happy to, you know, participate in and offer some resources there, and I can force them to do that.
I don't have any experience I can offer in this, but I definitely think it'd be helpful to take like some kind of generated DAG and run like a scan or a score analysis based on GitHub, as opposed to kind of picking through everything manually.
Right. So one of the things that I wanted to do here was identify how far we are away from each of the dependencies, you know, the master of each of the dependencies. I remember, Tim Alclair, you had, I remember one of your presentations, you had like how far away from.
Yeah, in the state of security and the last KubeCon contributor summit, we had a slide on like the top 20 most out of date dependencies by like number of commits behind head. And there were some that we were like close to 1,000 and like several years behind on patches. So that's definitely one metric we could kind of watch for, is when was the last patch to this library, and when is the last patch that we picked up?
Right. Do you still have the tools for generating that information again, Tim?
I think it was a bash script, but I can dig it up.
Okay, thank you. That will be helpful. And I remember Alok was doing some mod graph analysis too. At least he came up with like one full blown up, you know, really, really big, complicated, twisty spaghetti stuff.
I think it would be great if we, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, here is a link actually. The graph looks very crazy actually. It's a huge, huge graph. It's not of any use. It's such a big dependency tree there.
Right, but then we have to figure out how to focus on parts of it to actually pull out information.
I think it'd be great to have the methods that we used for these captured, so that we could really easily like run all of these things. Like, what are the top 20 built packages by size? What are the packages with the most incoming links? What are the packages with the most outgoing links? We could capture that on demand or regularly, so that we could actually see this over time, and or even evaluate it. Like, if we're trying to decide, is this new thing we're wanting to pull in or update like helping us or hurting us? It would be great to have that captured so we could really easily check that.
So can I pair the two of you up, Alok and Jordan? Jordan, you had some scripts that we could like document in the community repository and say that these are the way we analyze the you know, the things.
Yeah, we have guidelines for reviewing dependency updates, like make sure the license is good, make sure the thing is maintained-ish. I don't know how we determine that, but and so having something like this, like run this on master and run this on the prospective pull request, and like, is this taking us in a good direction or a bad direction, would be helpful.
Okay, so can the two of you update the doc based on what we have in the last week?
Sure. And Tim Allclair, can you shoot me maybe quick indication of your tool that you use?
Yeah, I'll drop links in the meeting notes for both of those.
And Andrew, you also were doing some of this DAG analysis before, right? For the cloud provider stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have some snippets of code that we can borrow from you for that?
No, our approach was pretty like just go list the direct imports and start tackling away. We got lucky because a lot of the imports were pretty easy to replace and didn't go into too many other things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we can use you to review the stuff that Alok and Jordan and Tim will come up. Okay.
And another thing that I can add, we can sort of play the 800-pound gorilla a little bit. And if we can propose interfaces and decouplings in upstream projects, I think we carry a little bit of weight in making those sort of proposals. So we should consider that to be on the table as we look at these things too.
Right. So specific feedback there, Tim, is the Google Alpha 0 API was like 20 meg. That was the biggest one that we have. And so we raised the question that do we actually need the Alpha 1 to be present in the KK, or whether all the things that were in Alpha 1 have already gone to beta or not. And we don't know the answer to that question yet. Then the follow-up was, like, should we keep adding more alpha features there if we are trying to take the external cloud things to the external cloud provider? So that was a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just wanted to throw in that last point because I forgot to mention it earlier. Like as we're looking at these things upstream, like we're not always beholden to trying to change or just drop dependencies. We can actually try to get interfaces, like think logging, right? The conversation that's going on around that. Concretely, like I think we have every single semver library that exists vendored in. Like I'm not even kidding. I think we have 4 separate semver libraries. Like that seems ripe for an API if we could get people to work towards it.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Jordan, do you want to talk about the proto gRPC?
Yeah, so if we're looking at like which shared dependencies are the most problematic, I would probably put this at the top of the list. Most of the big libraries that we pull in, like the cloud provider libraries, the etcd client libraries, and then all of our own proto generation libraries, depend on one or more of these shared protobuf libraries, and they depend on radically different versions. And whenever we bump one, it usually means having to regenerate all of our proto serialization, deserialization code, and then also changes the versions of the marshalling and marshalling code that we're using, hopefully compatibly, but they are phenomenally difficult to review. Looking at, I was talking to Clayton, like my first response whenever I see a pull request that regenerates all the proto stuff is like, I corrupted everything. Oh no, wait, that's what the code is supposed to look like. So it's 10,000 lines of one file versus 10,000 lines of a completely different file that's unreadable, and it's generated proto serialization. And so it's basically unreviewable, and it's kind of down in the guts of all of these libraries. And so there's actually a pull request right now to bump one of the cloud provider libraries, and it wants a newer version of proto, and so we're trying to figure out, is this going to be safe for etcd and safe for our libraries? I would put this particular one as the most concerning shared dependency, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. We have a long-term plan of at least the cloud provider libraries, moving those out, and that will help a lot. Then it would just be etcd and our proto use. That would help a lot, but that's not soon, right? Like best case, that's probably end of this year, and that's best case. And so until then, we have like a 9-month to 12-month window where if we need to bump a cloud provider library for a security fix or a feature fix, or it's going to cause this problem. So there's a link to an open pull request right now that is encountering this.
Okay. Thanks for bringing that up. I don't think we have any other solutions that we can offer here, though. Clayton, do you want to talk about the E2E test?
Yeah. So I actually will take some responsibility or blame, as you will, for this meeting, just because I got really annoyed while working with the conformance tests. Many of our EDE suites take very intensely deep dependencies on the Kubernetes code base just to get like 2 constants. So and some of them use utility classes, which means, the conformance tests could break fairly easily if someone's refactoring KK and they're like, oh, I'll change a constant. Constants totally can change. That's what a constant is, right? And so there was a general code cleanliness issue around that. There's also one of, from the conformance tests, because the EDE tests are intended to run outside the cluster, there really is no reason for them to rely on Kubernetes. And so one of the topics that I wanted the working group to at least discuss and get general input on, mostly because it's a cleanup, is, if we decide that moving, things to staging makes sense, the conformance tests and the EDE tests are a good candidate for that, just from the pure trimming dependencies, keeping it isolated from the code base to some degree, making it easier for others to go grab and depend on the conformance tests. I don't know how many vendors have completely re-implemented the conformance suite in another form. So like various distros that want to add their own EDE tests, whether they do that in their own form. We on the OpenShift side just reuse the code because it's easy. And so we reuse some of the core libraries. That's more in the testing commons effort, but at least gets into the idea of, just like our client libraries are reasonably well isolated components, should our tests that have the higher bar be reasonably well isolated as well?
Right. So the good news here on this one, Clayton, is Timothy is running a group that is looking into this, and they are trying to remove the framework directory into a separate staging area. And to that effort, the first piece of thing that they were trying to do is like, what are the utility methods that are there in framework directory, and how do we, where do they actually belong? Do they belong in the framework, or do they need to be moved elsewhere? So the target is to extract the framework out into a separate staging area and then go from there. That would be like the first milestone. Anybody here who's involved in that? Andrew, did you pick something? David?
So I've seen some of the results of that. I do think we need to provide some guidance when people start breaking out flags that, we have guidance on flags that says don't register unconditionally. Don't auto register these flags. Let me choose my flag sets, and let's follow the best practices that we've developed over time for having separation between flags and configuration. And so I have seen it. I have seen it because it has bit me. And it has bit me because it unconditionally registers flags now.
Yeah. And I mean, if there's nobody else here, I think like the meta question that came up was, the discussion that we had was, well, let's move it to staging and then just, be strict about dependencies, which is a fairly easy move. But then it got into we haven't really documented what goes into staging. And then there's another one, which is, like what things should go into staging, what things don't. We certainly evolved down that. I think getting this working group making some suggestions, like at a top level, like we believe in staging for this class of things, and getting that in writing would make it easier for folks doing random cleanups to kind of have an anchor and know what to suggest and where to suggest it. We certainly we have common libraries, but we also just have cleanliness. And this was in that weird cleanliness and common utilities case.
Clayton, can you add an action item, please? So we don't forget and we try to write it up.
Yeah, and I've been pretty involved in the testing commons effort too, and it's gaining a lot of traction. And we're the biggest motivation behind the testing commons effort we're using is related to the cloud provider efforts, because there is the separate cloud provider framework in there. So the approach that Tim St. Clair is suggesting is we first go through all the utility files and remove methods that we don't even need in the first place, and then do a second pass and try to remove some of those dependencies. So right now we just kicked off the let's go through all the files and remove unused methods and whatnot.
Okay. So things are piling up on the doc. Does anybody want to suggest what we should talk about next? Okay, let me pick one up. Who added the movement of streaming library out of KK? Was it you, Alok?
You're muted.
We were discussing with the SIG node to move the streaming library out of Kubernetes because CRI API was recently moved out, and then we found out that this is also a huge dependency that should be moved out. But so we were not finding the right home to where to move it out. So we had to open a KEP based on the SIG node's suggestion to find a right place for it. And then Tim suggested that maybe we should rethink that we need this streaming library now or not. So it's a thing that we can talk about.
Right. So which Tim are you talking about here? We have a few.
There is a
all clear. Was it?
Yeah.
Do you remember this one, Tim? All clear.
I don't. Let me click on that link and see if I can page in the context.
Right. I think this was about extending the CRI API to include the streaming stuff so that we can.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Thanks. So my only objection to kind of moving that out into a more usable location is that I actually want to try and move away from that functionality. We've now moved to a model by default where the CRI streaming proxy is only over localhost, and that all gets proxied through the kubelet. This was for security reasons, because it turned out to be pretty hard to get that redirection from the API server right. And also simplifies the authentication piece of it a lot, since we can just piggyback on the kubelet for that. And so as long as the kubelet is proxying that, I'd prefer for those streaming calls to just go directly through the CRI instead of needing to set up this separate streaming server locally. So I'll follow up with some folks on the node team and update that issue.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. I don't see anything else in the doc that we could talk about right now. I just want to try to call on people who haven't talked yet. Matt Farina, did you have something that you wanted to talk about today?
No, I was just here like Jace to try to make sure everything went smoothly and everyone had what they needed.
Justin? No. Okay. Mayank?
Busy removing packages here.
Mayank?
No, I'm just hearing. Thanks.
Okay. Brendan, did you have any specific things you wanted to cover?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. So, let me ask the dreaded question then. When do people want to meet for a regular cadence? Is this a good time or this is a bad time? Does anybody have an alternate suggestion, especially if we have to bring in more people from China and India? It's going to be, we'll have to set up alternate times, I think.
I don't mind the time, but Thursday is my worst day.
Okay.
I prefer a time that doesn't hit Eastern lunchtime. Not that that's like a high priority, but yeah. I like to eat.
Yeah, I'm hungry too. So yes, I feel you, David. Okay.
Maybe just do one of those doodles and we'll have a go at it. And maybe if we get enough people on the East Coast, we'll have it, guys.
Okay. So let me do doodle and let me propose like 2 times, one for Asia Pacific time zones, even if a lot of people here on the West Coast might not make it to that. We'll still have another call. So we'll have like call every other week. The idea is to try to figure out how we can do this in bite-sized pieces that we can go get people to help with. Since we're talking like big picture stuff, it's very hard to bring in new people unless we say like, Alok, go update Docker dependency. And then he goes around doing that and faces the problems and then comes back to us and say, this works, this doesn't work. So that is what I would like to try to do here, to kind of like see the big picture, see what we can achieve, see what we can delegate to people and find people to do it. Tim, go ahead.
Do we view the scope of this group as primarily culling dependencies, or do we actually want to tackle, maybe not right away, but larger issues of movement of everything into staging repos or restructuring, refactoring the main code base, et cetera?
Yes, absolutely. So as part of that, I also want to include things like developing on feature branches and what it takes as well. So I do want to start suggesting topics like that and invite Daniel and folks who are working on the server side apply, people like that. And so this was like, Jordan and I have been dealing with these culling dependencies for a few weeks now. So that was natural to start from here. Okay. Plus covering the existing base with the cloud provider stuff, which has been going for years now. So that's where we started. But yes, I do want to cover all the things that we talked about in the doc over a period of time. And I would like to, I wanted to set up the cadence first and then invite people around specific topics. So we can invite the testing commons people to give an update and people who are working. Also the storage, right? Storage people have been refactoring stuff for a while now. And I want to hear from them on what worked for them, what didn't work for them. They have an explosion of GitHub repos now, and they are in the process of culling some of them now. So there is stuff that we need to learn from them and use in the rest of the SIGs as well. Does that help, Tim? Okay, thank you. So anybody else wanted to talk about anything else? We can head back to the full.
You had a couple issues at the end. Did you want to talk about those?
Yes, Jordan, please go ahead.
This is it was meta questions. So like we kind of have the list of proposal or areas. I do think I had thought of a couple of things that as we go forward and discuss like what we should and shouldn't consider, like do we consider the implications of recommendations we have on other teams, right? Like one of the things about code organization is our default instinct is to split it all up. And when you split all the things up, you create more pain for people. And sometimes, that's okay because you've made the individual things easier to reason about and you're only affecting a small number of people but sometimes you actually make the problem worse for people. I do think we need to be, we need to have some heuristics as part of the process for what we're doing, that we're actually making things better for a specific set of people and that we're not just saying like, well, this makes our lives better. We're going to split up everybody in the community or people who inherit from client tools or people who have to test Kubernetes or like just make sure that we've got a set of people that we're trying to satisfy and we consider how each of the changes impacts them. Not every code cleanup thing actually improves the project and we should just write down what we think that balance is.
Yeah, it would be hard. So who wants to help write this up? Quinton, Clayton, the two of you?
Yeah, and I think we just want to like have, like this is an ask for all working groups is that you have a clearly defined purpose, you have goals. We all want to go make things better, but we should at least have something that we can fall back on, which is like, hey, like, does this make everybody's life easier? And when someone tells us that it's not, how do we have that discussion?
Understood. So one example that I have from recent memory is, we have not been talking about the CRI for Docker, but we've been like carrying along the Docker shim, but it's been dragging us back since a lot of people are not using Docker in their environments, right? So that is an example of something that we are continuing to carry the debt, and it would make things simpler for SIG-Node, but the topic wasn't raised, and we are not actively working on that topic. So I think we need to bring surface things like that into KEPs and find owners for that. But then we've also had missteps where, for example, the CRD stuff, we are still trying to figure out how do we install the CRD, right? I don't think that's a solved problem yet. And then we told the CSI folks to move things to CRDs, but then, now some of their stuff went back into KK. And the runtime class is also, some of it is going to go back into KK. So I want to avoid that where we are giving conflict in information. Also, I think that is important to this group as well.
A couple points about the specific things you put in the doc, Clayton. Binary size I see as like secondary or tertiary. Like I think we care about it, but we care about maintainability far more. And if several of the packages that were identified in the, hey, these packages are big issue are ones that are under cloud providers that we actually have kind of a bigger picture strategy for dealing with holistically. And so I think this area in particular, we're all super busy. And so there's only a finite amount of effort we can put into this. And so if there is already an effort in place to address something like one of the packages are big, I would probably just say, well, here's the plan for getting rid of that whole dependency, and here's the timeline, and let's live with the extra 10 or 20 megabytes until then, rather than try to untangle things for short-term size gain. For the second one, like splitting things out will always make someone's life harder. The thing that I want to make sure that we keep in mind is that sometimes it's not a trade-off between something that's easy for us or easy for someone else. Sometimes it's like, this makes it possible for us to maintain Kubernetes. And if you have like 6 different things that all require different levels of something, sometimes it is literally impossible to maintain Kubernetes. And so does splitting something out make life more painful for someone? Possibly, but there's not always an alternative. So I agree that we don't want to do it blindly. We don't want to do it blithely. It's fun. But so we should just have good reasons for the things that we're splitting out. Like, we're splitting this out because we can't maintain the tree the way it is. And I will say that it is much easier to catch these things when they're coming in than when they are in and are causing problems. And so I think something that would help us a lot is getting good information for people reviewing things getting introduced. So we can say not just, okay, this happens to compile and all tests fast, so we managed to find a state that works, so great, let's let it in. But we can actually like see what it's doing and saying, oh, well, this is actually causing gridlock, and we're not going to be able to bump this. If we get a security update or something, we cannot change this now because we'll never find a magic level that works with all 6 things that require it. Yeah, getting good visibility to the current state so we can make decisions about whether a proposed change is helping us or hurting us.
Thanks, Jordan. Valerie, you have the last say. You're on mute.
About priority list, you mean?
Sure.
I don't have very strong opinions about that, but I do think it'd be very helpful to have a list that we can kind of quickly agree on and have as something in our Gibble so that we don't kind of wrestle too much with individual decisions.
Okay, and you propose security greater than fragility?
It was a rough example. Like,
okay,
if we can just make sure that in a particular case, we kind of know what's best to do based on our priorities.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks everyone. We are out of time. I will send a doodle poll and let's make sure that we can meet next week also. Okay, thanks, bye.
Thanks for pulling this together. Super valuable. Thanks, Tim and Jordan and whoever else was involved in getting this all together.
Thanks, Quentin. Bye.